Okay. So here's what Logan was just talking about with the 4-year ranges on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So the way that we're choosing to look at this is we've actually been in a massive reaccumulation range on Bitcoin for the past 4 years that just finally broke out. So when you come out of an accumulation range this large and for that long, you're going to get massive upside. You're going to get an explosive move to the upside, which we've only started the first leg up higher. So this was the previous range, this is the current range. So if I put on the fibs, because I should have the fibs for this. Where are you at? These ones. Okay. So on a higher time frame, you look at Bitcoin from the previous cycle until now. So here was January 21. So yeah, this is the double top from last cycle. Okay. So we get this big run up on Bitcoin in the springtime. Then we get the second run up here in Q3 and beginning of Q4. We come back down. We get this bear market for 1 year in 2022. Then we start the bull run again here in 2023. We get up and then we're up and then we're up. Okay, cool. So what's the range here? So if you put it in log mode, because this asset is getting adopted on a logarithmic scale, it's an exponential growth asset. So we want to look at this in log mode. We put the fibs on here. We draw this range. Here's the range high. Here's the range low. And you see how there's interaction with the range, mid-range, top of the range, mid-range interaction. Here's the bottom of the range, mid-range. You get this little breakout. You come up. You get the interaction with the top of the range. And then we start to do this was this 8-month range from last year. So we right underneath the range high. We kept rejecting, right, at the 1. Finally, you see where this green candle is right here? The first green candle to shoot through this range high, what happens? You get an explosive breakout. So that's confirmation that Bitcoin was respecting the range that we just drew, okay? So let's do this. So this range is valid. Well, if you look at this fib then, what's the fib here on Bitcoin? The 1.618 is over at 173,000, okay? So to get you guys all bulled up a little bit after this weekend, I would expect that to be the minimum that we go on Bitcoin this cycle. Okay. Now, whether or not we go higher will be dependent on how long this cycle is dragged out by the adoption of a Bitcoin reserve by the US, etc. Those types of things would cause the cycle to be extended because now you have institutional buyers that are on a government scale where they have effectively unlimited liquidity and they could just push this as high as they want it to go. So that's just a catalyst that we're not going to assume is going to happen. But 1.618 is at this 173,000. Okay. So we finally break out of this range right here. Here's this first leg up. Then we're starting to reaccumulate again. I would expect one more leg up about here to this like 130, 135,000 where we had fib confluence before we were looking at. I would expect another range here and then up here. This would be our last leg before we end up coming back down. Okay. That's the expectation on a higher time frame on Bitcoin. So keep that in mind. Okay. So Bitcoin, this is not broken down. We're good. We're fine. Anything you want to add to that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Bitcoin too, it's like I know Tate actually he had tweeted about it, and I've thought about it a few times. I was just thinking about it now, looking at this chart, that I think we're definitely going to get to a point with Bitcoin where, I mean, if you look at over the past 10 years how it's performed overall as an asset, if you would have just continued to add Bitcoin to your portfolio every single week for the past 10 years, you would have outperformed any asset that you could have ever possibly invested into, pretty much. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but for something that you could continuously put a significant amount of money into,
right,
over the past 10 years, obviously there's been bear markets and bull markets, et cetera, but averaged out across the past 10 years, it's outperformed any stock that you could have invested in, with the exception of maybe a couple, that were just kind of one-offs that would never have been able to predict.
Right.
But I think that Bitcoin is definitely going to get to the point where the price is just going to continue to go up. I mean, with it having a limited supply, there's only so many Bitcoin. It's going to get to the point where people just buy Bitcoin and they're just going to hold it forever because eventually you're not going to be able to get it anymore.
Correct.
So it's like, people have price targets, and I mean, I think it's definitely smart to have price targets for this cycle. I mean, I think 170,000 before the end of 2025 is definitely doable. But it's going to get to a point where it's just going to keep going up and up and up. And then Bitcoin's going to hit $1 million per Bitcoin. And then it's just people aren't going to sell anymore because there's no sense in holding your money in anything else. It's like, why would people want to hold fiat currency and have US dollars whenever you can pretty much buy anything you want to with crypto once it's further adopted in the US,
Mm-hmm.
and you can hold it in an appreciating asset that has a limited supply that's deflationary instead of inflationary? Why would you want to hold fiat over this?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's what we're going to get to, in my opinion, eventually, is people are just going to continue to buy Bitcoin and then just never sell it. And then the price will go to $1 million and the game will be over.
Correct.
So I don't think that'll happen this cycle. So I do think it's good to have price targets. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you can't really even have moon boy targets on Bitcoin because it's going to go to $1 million or higher. It's inevitable, I think, at this point.
I agree, 1000%. It's going to become gold, which is exactly what happened with gold. They were accumulating gold back in the early 1900s. What happens? It just perma goes up over. It just perma goes up. They just always were buying it. It's a store of value. So what's going to happen with Bitcoin is it's going to replace gold as a store of value, and it's going to become a game theory because once the U.S. announces that they're going to do the strategic Bitcoin reserve and they're going to allocate X amount of dollars to get X amount of Bitcoin supply, it's then going to become a race for every single other nation on the planet to then implement the same thing and then accumulate their Bitcoin. And so what you get is this game theory where everybody starts to think, well, I need to front run this country because if I don't front run that country, then I'm going to end up buying Bitcoin at this price. And then it just continues to go down the line. So then what happens is then you get this stampede all of a sudden from all these nations who start saying, fuck, we got to go buy the Bitcoin now. And then it just becomes more parabolic from there. So when that happens, it is going to get outrageous. It's going to get insane. And that's why we're playing these beta plays, these altcoins, is because you want to accumulate as much capital as humanly possible. So where you can buy a significant portion of the Bitcoin supply so that when that does happen, you're going to benefit from that. But I agree. I think this is probably the last cycle where it's going to be super meaningful and you're very capable of outperforming Bitcoin to a high degree. But after this, it's going to become, you're definitely going to want to allocate a good amount of capital to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, sorry, no one can say for certain, but I feel like the bear markets aren't going to be
Yes.
like they were before in the future too. Because I mean, the bear markets have been fully dependent on the performance of majors in the past. It's like, the only reason we have a bear market is because Bitcoin decides to bleed for a year and a half or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if people aren't paying attention to what's happening cyclically and, crypto is just getting further and further adopted by not just more individuals, but by more institutions, by more countries entirely, then there's going to be a constant pursuit to acquire as much of it as possible. And I mean, I think it's going to be like anything. It's going to be not a lot at first, but then all at once. The United States, once they officially, start accumulating for the Bitcoin reserve, I think the number that they had announced was roughly $6 billion that they were going to allocate to acquiring Bitcoin, which is obviously pretty massive.
Mm-hmm.
So the United States doing it's a huge step. And then, I mean, once some more countries I know that, I think Czechoslovakia announced it there, or who was it?
Yeah, it was a Northern European country. It was
It's where Jackass is from.
yeah. I think it is Czech. I think it is. Is it Czechoslovakia or is it Czech Republic?
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
I think Czech Republic, actually.
Yeah, I think it's Czech Republic.
Either way, though, I think it was the first country in the Western hemisphere to adopt crypto like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, now it's going to be a domino effect, and I mean, the bull markets or the bear markets aren't going to happen if that continues to just drag out the upward spiral of Bitcoin.
Yep.
And then I mean, once Bitcoin is tapped out, and not tapped out, but people just aren't selling it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be forced to roll down the risk curve, and where's the first place they're going to go?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go to Ethereum.
Exactly. This is why people are building on the Ethereum network. So, okay. So let's just look at this real quick and then we'll go to Ethereum. So Bitcoin, just to show you guys, this is really giving us no information anymore. So Bitcoin didn't break down from the range, which is clear that they're not ending the cycle. They protected this range whenever they wicked this down on Sunday. It did not even break out of this range. Okay. So I put on some POC, some points of control, just to show on the chart here. Bitcoin hovering in between these 2 points of control, and even between the monthly open and the yearly open, I would argue that it's actually anything within this monthly open and this yearly open means nothing. There's no signal here. They're just ping-ponging it back and forth until they decide a direction with the market. And this is why you haven't seen any direction or any volatility in the altcoins really, outside of being able to short them on some assets, is because nobody knows what the hell's going on. Everybody's cautious as to what the direction is going to be in the market, so they're not reallocating their capital yet. So there's zero signal here. Until you see Bitcoin get above this POC, so this point of control right here, we're not going anywhere. If you see Bitcoin, and when you see Bitcoin reclaim and punch through this POC right up here, so about 104.5, 105,000, once you get back up there, then we're resuming we should start taking that next leg higher. Same thing to the downside. If we're still within these two POCs right here, I don't see any reason for us to come down below them again. So this one, of course, is confluent with the 2025 yearly open. We should hold this $93,000 mark as well.